Once again, I am forced to deal with hurtful allegations, spurious rumours about misallocations of funds, and I'm getting sick and tired of it. This latest rumour is the most ridiculous one yet. No, I am not using my Patreon money to go and build ironic death traps around the city that teach people about the errors of their ways and the meanings of their lives. This rumour-mongering is distasteful to me, and I will put a stop to it, okay? It's really not that difficult. Besides which, Jimsaw would be a ridiculous name for a killer anyway, so I don't know where you got that idea from. So let's hear no more about it. Because if anyone brings this up again, I'm going to put them in an ironic death trap. Not that I've got an ironic death trap, you understand, because I don't do that kind of thing. You know, I just spend my money on the show, you know. Jimsaw. It's a silly name.
In the wake of the announcement that Assassin's Creed Syndicate would have microtransactions, because of course it fucking would, I feel it's time to talk about something I once wrote about many years ago: the insidious power of silence, and the way in which that silence is generated by bullshit-induced audience apathy. Now let's be blunt. We all know by now that microtransactions in $60 games are not technically news. Not anymore. The fact that Ubisoft is going to release another fee-to-pay game isn't shocking, it's expected, it's practically banal. And that's a horrible situation to be in, because the moment something gross becomes banal, we stop caring about it, the silence creeps in, and the publishers continue pumping out horseshit until it's basically acceptable. This is why I always want to see fee-to-pay games as headlines, as breaking news, treated as a big deal. It's why I kick off about it so much, even in the wake of people saying, "Look Jim, we get it, it's not gonna change, nobody's surprised anymore, get over it." I will never get over it. As I've said time and time again, freemium elements have no place in a $60 retail game, no matter how optional the publishers disingenuously claim they are. I've met resistance and disagreement in my commitment to calling this shit out, of course. Notably, some games journalists have argued that once a thing becomes more regular, like microtransactions, it should not be treated as a news story. I got into some debates about that when the Metal Gear Solid 5 ones were revealed, as some journos said it shouldn't be treated like a story anymore, and I tried to tell them, but yes it should, because it's still bollocks. And it's exactly that kind of apathy that makes a not okay thing become okay. It should always be a story, because normality does not make an uncool thing cool. Media consumers, for want of a better term, are bored easily sometimes, and are quick to forget, and game publishers know this. They understand the power of silence. We saw it with Gearbox and Sega at the launch of Aliens Colonial Marines and the controversy surrounding that. We saw it with EA Maxis at SimCity's broken launch. John Walker of Rock Paper Shotgun once aptly said, "When it comes to gaming controversies, if you ignore it, it will go away." No matter how badly a publisher screws its customers, no matter how controversial a game release, all a company has to do is close ranks and hold a phalanx position until the attackers stop poking. Because the vast majority of them will. They will get bored, they will tire of it, and when it happens again, they'll have experienced it all before and it won't matter to them as much. Being indignant, no matter how righteously, is a game of diminishing returns, one that inevitably ends in silence. Games media, and by extension the audience that follows it, it's a largely reactionary entity. Without someone doing or saying something we can react to, we can't necessarily cover it. When SimCity first had its terrible launch, EA and Maxis made many wild promises and reassurances, which the games media could disseminate and keep the pressure going. But then, EA and Maxis closed ranks, erected that phalanx, maintained that radio silence, and much of the controversy just went. It just went. people forget about these things. And not only can people get bored of these things, they can become aggressive in their apathy. It's something I've talked about before, aggressive apathy. When I cover the shittiness that is Steam's abysmal quality control, when I talk about how excessive downloadable content is exploitative, when I criticize fee-to-pay game mechanics, pre-orders, hype culture, I get a good contingent of people telling me to stop whining, to drop it, to stop beating a dead horse. And that's exactly what publishers want. They want to keep their heads down, have those still talking about problems ostracized as whingers, and then they can come back later with another get-rich-quick scheme that the community at large becomes increasingly inoculized to. The real kicker is, if you want to keep these stories alive, if you care about industry bullshit and feel it's too important to simply forget, you have no choice but to reinforce the apathetic people's claims and look like a vindictive crackpot. After all, if publishers are staying quiet but continue to pull the same shady shit, what can you do? At that point, your options are limited and mostly involve either inventing new articles from whole cloth, be it a no-news post that simply reminds people a problem still exists, or finding some contrived way to pen a fresh op-ed on things people already know about, or just repeating yourself over and over again. At that point, you end up becoming, well, me. Here on this show, beating the allegedly dead horse. Most games media don't want to be that guy. They don't want to become some raving demagogue, and I do find it hard to blame them. Some pundits want to just write about the software and blot out the seedy surroundings, and I get that. Hell, many readers want that. Many viewers want that, and I understand it completely. In fact, if you cover a topic too many times, most readers will start a backlash. They'll get sick of it, which is another issue that cripples one's ability to keep the pressure going. Sometimes publishers themselves will try to initiate that backlash. Back when EA was earning a fair share of well-deserved scorn for broken game releases and customer-harming business practices, Peter Moore himself wrote self-serving fan fiction, painting everybody who criticised EA as a homophobic bigot, angry that Mass Effect has same-sex relationships and Madden had certain athletes on its cover. The truth is that, yes, there are homophobic and racist morons who get angry over diversity in games. I've argued with those people myself. But when Moore exploited that to escape criticism, he did something that I still find quite fucking offensive. I've been told to get over it more than I can adequately remember. I've gotten told to get over almost everything I continue to care about, and I dare say it's a familiar phrase to anybody who's talked about a certain controversial subject for a long enough amount of time. Sadly, that's what publishers bank on. They want everybody to get over it, so apathy wins. The once shocking overstepping of bounds becomes par for the course, and the next unfinished piece of AAA shite can rake in pre-orders and generate hype. If you get mad at me for covering the same topics often, you should ask yourself if you really ought to be mad at me, or mad at the industry that simply refuses to change most of the time. If you're sick of hearing about it, why not get sick of the source, not the broadcaster? If they didn't keep doing shitty things, I wouldn't have material to keep talking about. Or maybe that's the problem, that the industry does refuse to change so often that many consider shows like this ultimately hopeless, that my rambling outrages are simply hitting brick walls, which is why I'm so utterly thrilled this past week happened. This week, Square Enix announced it would cease Deus Ex Mankind Divided's utterly atrocious augment your pre-order scheme. The plan to merge pre-order culture with crowdfunding mechanics was thoroughly galling to a ton of vocal dissenters who kept that pressure up so much that Square Enix caved. The intense coverage of the pre-order plan, the repeated urgings from media and fans not to buy into it, led to Augment Your Pre-Order becoming a huge flop and a PR disaster. And that, my friends, is the power of noise versus silence. The squeaky wheel does not, contrary to the popular phrase, always get the grease. However, it's worth squeaking anyway, and loudly, because sometimes you get a sweet shot of that juicy, greasy lube. A few years back, online passes were my particular enemy of choice. Remember those? The cack-handed attempt to fight second-hand games by locking online multiplayer behind a one-use code, poorly implemented in a lot of games, and sometimes sectioning off single-player content as well. It was gross, an attempt at harming a market that's actually beneficial to the industry long-term, and something I ranted and raved about and was told to get over by a lot of people. But a good few people stuck with it. They kept up the pressure. They kept treating every online pass as a breaking news story in the face of others telling them it was boring and old. And now, online passes are dead, dead. And those little victories are why I keep on. This is why I always maintain a level of outrage and shock at microtransactions in premium games, at Steam's poor quality control, at abhorrent publisher business practices, no matter how many times they happen. Because the moment I find it boring, the moment the silence begins, and industry bullshit wins the day. But every now and then, we squeak enough, we get that grease, sometimes we win. And that chance is worth keeping on, keeping on. I do hope that those who do get over these things and angrily demand others join them understand they're essentially a brick in the publisher's stone wall. Now, nobody is obligated to be angry and indignant. I would not be so arrogant as to demand any reader or fellow writer take up arms for a cause they don't believe in and more than likely don't think matters. However, I do ask for an understanding equal to mine, an understanding that it's equally arrogant to demand others stop caring about something just because you don't care. I extend that to every game journalist who has done the same too. Ones I've seen publicly laughing with publishers at all the so-called entitled gamers, the ones who've argued with me that I beat a dead horse and that the latest Ubisoft or Konami fuckery isn't news, because it's happened before. You want to be a part of the silence despite your ability to reach an audience? Fine, but don't go railing on the rest of us. And the publishers themselves, cowering behind that stone wall waiting for the latest conflict to resolve on its own, are fucking cravens who sidestep issues or give out half-hearted press releases that they're aware of issues, like Activision recently did over the unforgivable Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. Or they'll pull a more and paint their critics as reactionary vocal minorities, boast of the money they make, and then assume that makes them right. And fuck letting them off the hook that easily. Yes, I will continue to beat dead horses, and no, I will not get over it. Microtransactions in Syndicate are no less skin-crawling to me than they were in Unity. Pro Skater 5's quality is no less disgusting to me than SimCity's, and whatever horrible, desperate attempt to needle pre-orders out of customers that comes along next will be no more slimy to me than Deus Ex Mankind Divided's gloriously failed one. To me, anyway. But what do I know? I'm just a rambling madman who needs to get over it. But I won't.
Hello, Capcom executive. I want to play a game. You see, for your entire career, you have promoted on-disc DLC, selling people content that is nothing more than, shall we say, a key. The room you're in now is filling with a deadly toxin, and if you do not find the key and get out, you will definitely die for realsies. The key? Well, you're so fond of on-disc content. But what if the key was on dick? On dick key, because you sell keys and, you know, it's on the disc, and disc sounds a bit like dick. You gotta cut your dick open and get it.
And actually, you know what? If I'm being honest, that sounds harsh. It sounded good in my head, but then when I said it out loud, that's kind of gross and well over the line. Okay, maybe we won't put a key in someone's dick. Huh. Back to the drawing board.
Live or die, and thank God for me.
That's a good sign-off. No, this is definitely not going to work.